welcome to the Canarian International Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Mossy and I am an alcoholic.
And my name is Mick and I'm serving as a joint secretary as well. Today, please join us for a moment's silence to remember the still suffering alcoholics inside and outside this meeting.
Take the preamble.
Yeah, my name is Kathy. I am an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problems and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. AA has no dues or fees. It is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And a very warm welcome goes out to any newcomers or anyone returning to Alcoholics Anonymous.
The chat is now disabled until the end of the meeting, except for the meeting host. If you feel the security of this meeting is at risk at any time during the meeting, please private message one of the co-hosts so that they can check it out.
And that's it, guys. As you know, this is an old-timers meeting. This evening we have two speakers. They're going to speak for about 30 minutes each. We have Claire from coming in first, and Serillio will be speaking after. So we'll hand it over to you, Claire, and let you do your thing. And thanks a million for sharing with us. There you go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Claire, and I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. And I say grateful because today I've learned to live in a solution instead of the problem. And it took me a long time to understand that I was the problem. Today, I don't blame everyone else for all my adventures. And I don't have much of a drunk-a-log. I drank in a blackout. Every time I put a drink to my mouth, I was in an immediate blackout. So I had no idea where I was, who I was with, what I did. But I have to remember what my drinking did to me. It took me to the bowels of the city of Lawrence, Massachusetts, where I grew up, where I settled for less, where I sold myself short. I didn't believe I was deserving of anything good in my life. The nuns had me convinced, Catholic school 12 years, had me convinced that I would never amount to anything. God was going to punish me and I was going to hell. So why in the hell should I bother to be good? And that's when my disease kept talking to me in my own voice. And my journey continued. I continued to be wherever and not remember where. And, I worked for a great company and they were great enablers, and Christmas time, they say no alcohol on the premises. I worked for a company that's 6 stories high, a third of a mile long. And so Christmas time, we'd fill up the water jugs with vodka and nobody would know. And the bosses would be with us drinking. And that's where my drinking took me. My disease took me. At 19 years old, I'd become a single mom and I swore I was going to be the best mother there ever was. My daughter was 5 years old and I was leaving her alone at night. 10 o'clock at night, I'd be out the door. 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock, I'd be coming in. And thinking nothing of it. And my disease kept saying, it's okay, the landlady's there, home. She was 80 years old and I was upstairs. She wasn't going to climb up and down those stairs. But I didn't care. I had become so self-centered, so selfish, and I was looking for a good time. So I kept partying and partying and partying, and I never thought about drinking and drinking and drinking, but I only went to parties where alcohol was being served. And, I hated being alone, and I thought as long as I had a man by my side that I was going to be okay. Men had become the solution to all of my problems. I don't know about anyone else. And that's where my drinking took me. And that went on for years and years and years. And I met a man in a bar. Where else was I going to meet a man? I got a job at the bar so I could get free drinks. I was the janitor of the bar, so I got keys to the place. So I was in control of my actions, of my drinking, so I thought, and that went on for a long time. So I met a guy. We talked about getting married. We bought a house. We moved his mother-in-law, his mother and his father in with us. His mother was very nosy and his father was very ill. And the day we got married, his mother, I'm 5'1", she came up to hear me and she goes, "Just remember, I'm his mother and I will always come first." And that scared the crap out of me. For the past few years, I did controlled drinking. I didn't realize, I didn't want anybody seeing the real Claire. And I was so terrified to deal with this woman. What am I going to do? And I married a workaholic and I got pregnant right after we got married. So I had a 12-year-old daughter and a brand new baby. And when I was able to go back to work, I worked all day. And then I went to school nights. My husband was a workaholic. My mother-in-law was interfering. And I just felt so disconnected. And I felt like something was missing. So after 7.5 years, I left my husband. My disease kept saying, "Get the hell out of there." And I did. Am I proud of that? No, because my daughter says, "Mom, I'm staying." And I didn't think I was good enough to take my son with me, where I was not a good mother to my daughter. And so I left and moved in with a friend. And I pray that that's when I hit my bottom. For 5 months, I drank on a daily basis. For 5 months, I drank in blackouts. For 5 months, I went to work every day, but I went out for liquid lunches, came back to work in a blackout, and I was a computer technician on European systems. It's a wonder I didn't blow up the company. But it didn't matter to me. I never felt complete unless I had that drink in me. And that went on for those 5 months. And then I decided it was time to find a new hostage. And I went to a singles dance where my company used to have their Christmas parties. And I walked in and I saw two guys that I used to drink with. And I'm going, "Oh no, what are they doing here? They're going to ruin my night." And one says, "Hey, Claire, how are you?" And I says, "Good." He says, "Remember so-and-so?" Part of my language, everybody, but this is what I said to him. "I remember you. You were nothing but a drunken bum and a real asshole." And he said, "Would you like to dance?" I just called the guy an asshole and he wants to dance with me. He's, "Can I buy you a drink?" I said, "I'm not drinking." It was December 4th, 1988. The roads were a sheet of ice. I was not drinking that night. And he says, "Can I buy you a drink?" I said, "I'm not drinking." He says, "How long?" I go, "Just for today." And he smiled and I still didn't understand it. And he says, "I'll follow you home to make sure you get home safely." So on the way home, I was going around a sharp bend and I hit a patch of black ice. And my car started to go directly into the bridge abutment. Now, I hadn't been drinking that night, but I remember saying, "God, if I make it through this, I'll never drink again." I don't know where that came from. And as God is my judge, my car literally went around the bridge abutment. It was a God moment, but I didn't think of it at the moment. And my friend called a tow truck because I ended up in the snow in the median. And I said, "Something's different about you. You're not the jerk I remember." And that's when he shared with me that he was in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's when he shared with me that he went to meetings to learn how to live without picking up that sucker drink. And because he was a man, of course I was going to listen. And I got home safely, and he said it will get better. And I called him the next night, and it will get better. And after 3 nights of hearing, it will get better, I still didn't have a clue. And on December 7th, 1988, my 17-year-old cousin Ed put a gun in his mouth, pulled the trigger, and he was successful, and that brought me to my knees. And I knew if I continued living the life I was living, I was going to die. I didn't want to die, but I didn't know how to live. So I picked up the phone and called this guy in AA. So the next day we're talking, and he said, "What are you doing tonight?" I thought he was asking me out. "Oh, nothing. I'm free as a bird." And he says, "I'll take you to a meeting." And I went, "But?" He goes, "Yeah, you have your butt in gear, girl. I am taking you to a meeting." And he took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 4 days without a drink. And he told me to sit up front, shut up, and listen. I know how to listen, and I knew how to sit up front, but I'm not very good at shutting up. But God directed me, and I sat up front. I don't remember what those old men said, but I do remember they talked about feelings. And if men can talk so openly about their feelings and their emotions, there must be some truth to it. So I got my first chip, 4 days clean and sober, and I got my first chip, and I cried like a baby. For the first time, Claire did something for Claire, not the guy upstairs, downstairs, up the street, down the street, or next door. For the first time. And I joined 7 groups. I wanted to have a different group every day of the week, but I wouldn't go to a big book meeting or a step meeting. I was so full of fear. If you got to know the real Claire, you would ask me to leave. I had this disease and such a moral issue. I thought I was lower than whale crap. And that's where my disease took me. And I just didn't know what to do. So I kept going to meetings. I wasn't drinking, but I really wasn't working a program. I was just existing, and I don't suggest that to anybody. And I told my mom and dad I was in the program. My mother cried like a baby because her father was a raging alcoholic, and my father's brother died of a wet brain. And he said, "You like to talk and you like to help people. You're right where you belong." That's the first time I didn't argue with my dad when he said something to me. And so I kept going to meetings and going to meetings, just existing, so full of fear. Somebody says, replace your fear with faith. But I had no faith. I didn't want anything to do with a higher power. He was going to send me to hell. That's what I was thinking. And so I kept going. And September 20th, 1992, I called home to check on my son. He came to live with me. And I used to take him to meetings. His first meeting is, Mommy, I recognize a lot of people from your parties." I said, "Michael, quiet." But anyways, I called home, and he says, "Mommy, you got to come home. Mommy, come home. Michael, what's wrong? Mommy, come home. Michael." And this went on, and my neighbor took the phone and informed me that my mom and dad were in an auto accident, and my mother died on the operating table, and my dad lay in a coma, and that brought me to my knees. I wanted to die. I'd lost my best friend. My getting sober helped me to get closer to my mother and not be such a defiant daughter. And I was miserable. I was so full of fear. I wanted to drink. I had to ID my mother's body in the morgue. I was sober. My brothers all had a drink, and they offered me, but 2 long-timers told me, "Claire, picking up a drink or a substitute will never give you back what you've lost," including myself. And so I didn't drink. At the wake, over 1,000 people attended my mother's wake, and there was about 200 or 300 from the fellowship. And my aunt says, "Claire, you know so many people." And that's when I told her I was in AA. And she says, "Well, your cousin Bobby just celebrated 3 years." Then she said, my cousin Ann says, "Claire, I'm coming up on 6 years." And my Uncle Paul says, "I'm coming up on 44 years. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was part of my family and part of AA. I didn't have to keep them separate like I was doing. I was basically just existing. And so, you know, I got through the funeral, but that night I was angry at God. How dare you take my mother away, my best friend? And I went out to drink. I went to a club that I'd never been to. And the bouncer, 350 pounds of him, says, Claire, what the hell are you doing here? You look like crap. And he was a friend of Bill's, one of my sober friends, and he wasn't letting me in. And he sent me to his house, and 2 people from AA spoon-fed me AA for 2 days. Then I finally understood what fellowship was about. And then I was able to be there with my dad when he passed. But the night before he passed, I was angry because we got a call. We had to make a decision. So I went out to drink that night. I said, what I wouldn't do for a beer. I don't even like beer. And I'm driving by this church, and the cardinal is standing in front of the church. I wasn't a fan of his, but it was like God was leading me the way. I stopped my car, I jumped out, and I babbled on and on and on and on about what I was going through, about my mom, my dad, yada, 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 yada. He says, I will pray for you, and you will make the right decision. And there was an AA meeting starting at that moment at that church. Another God moment. And I finally understood. Well, the day after my father died, a friend tapped me on the shoulder, says, Claire, did you drink? I said, of course not. She says, who do you think was by your side? And she opened my ears and opened my heart to a power greater than me. And September 29th, 1992, I was almost 4 years sober, and I finally surrendered to a power greater than me. And I allowed my higher power in my life. And I begged him to please keep me sober. You know, I didn't know where else to go, what else to do. And I got through it all. And that was 33 years ago. 33 years ago today is when I went out to have that beer. And I'm still sober, all because of God's grace. You know, and that little boy that I used to take to meetings, when my parents died, he started getting defiant, and I kept bailing him out of jail. He was 11 years old. He was between 11 and 14, and I kept having to bail him out. Juvie. And I just felt like I wasn't a good mother. And somebody says, Ma, you brought us up the same way, my daughter. And she says, you instill the same values, but we make our own decisions. So I watched my son trying to get in more trouble, and I just kept praying. And at 15 years old, he's sitting in the back seat of my car. And my friend, God rest her soul, Val knows who I'm talking about. And he says, Ma, I'm really grateful you're an alcoholic. Now, what 15-year-old kid in his right mind would be grateful to have an alcoholic mom? He says, remember when you took me to all those AA meetings? And I said, yeah. I didn't know where he was going with this. He says, well, Alcoholics Anonymous taught me that alcohol was the forbidden fruit. But I had to take a bite, and I got myself in trouble. And this is the most amazing thing he said to me. But thanks to you, Mom, I know I have a place to go. And at 15, he walked through those doors on his own. You know, and he stopped messing around with drugs and drinking. And today we have an amazing relationship. So I've had a lot of God shots, a lot of God moments in my recovery. And what it's shown me, that I don't have to pick up that sucker drink, no matter what. I still go to meetings. I go to meetings every day. sometimes 2 or 3 a day. When COVID hit, I was doing 10 or more Zoom meetings, and people would say, I hate Zoom, but it saved my sanity and it saved a lot of people's lives, and by Zoom, I get to meet people from all over the world, and I get to meet Mossy again, and I go to big book meetings, I go to step meetings, I work a program to the best of my ability, not everyone else's ability. I go on commitments. I was an anniversary speaker a few weeks ago, and I felt so blessed that somebody would actually ask me to do that. But, I don't do it to brag, but I do it to leave a message of hope, especially for the newcomer or anyone that might be struggling, or maybe somebody's going through what I went through. And that's how I work my program to the best of my ability. I have a higher power in my life today. I work the steps. I apply them to my life. I don't just talk about them. I apply them to my everyday life. And my life has changed tremendously. I'm going to be 76 years old in a couple of weeks. And I got sober at 39. And when I think about these kids that come into the program at 15, 20, 25, I feel, I am so grateful that they're coming much younger instead of doing more destruction to their lives. And some of my friends wouldn't drink in front of me. And I says, I don't have a problem with your drinking. I have a problem when I drink. So if you want to drink, fine. And if it gets in my face, I remove myself. And that's what I was taught. I'm powerless over other people, but I'm not powerless over myself. So it's the decisions that I make and the choices that I make can make a difference in my life. So my anniversary is December 4th, 88, and I say that not to brag, but to let people know that if you work this program, it works. If you work this program, I've changed. Life hasn't changed. I mean, I lost my parents. I still miss them terribly. The anniversary of my dad is tomorrow. That's why I was telling Mossy, he couldn't have asked me to speak at a better time. Because it brings me back to when I lost my mom and dad, but it brings me back to when I didn't drink because of God's grace, because of the amazing fellowship that surrounds us. And I will end it with this poem. When I first got sober, as I said, I was so full of fear. I didn't know how to live one day at a time. I didn't understand too much of anything. And I'd go to meetings and I felt so insecure with women. I would sit with just the men and the women say, the men with the men and the women with the women. And I'd say, I just sit where I wanted to sit. And I was defiant in my early recovery. And it was like, mind your own business, lady. But I understood why she was telling me that. It was for my own good, And so I found this poem because I was still full of fear when anybody told me what to do. I didn't want to make any mistakes, but we're human beings. And I found this poem and it said, do not grieve over the past, for it is gone. Do not worry about the future, for it has not yet come. Just live in the present and make it so beautiful that it is worthwhile remembering. And that's how I try to live today, one day at a time. And thank you, Mossy, for asking me to speak today.
Thank you, Claire. That was just amazing. I got so much from it. I got so much identification. And one of the things you reminded me of there is when my mother passed, I was there with her. I was able to make her life a lot more comfortable because of this fellowship. And I remember walking into the church about an hour and a half before the funeral. I wanted to make sure everything was right. And there was 2 members sitting down the back of the church waiting for me. They didn't get up and shake my hand or anything. They didn't, just nodded. to let me know they were there and they were staying. And a member came up to me as we buried my mother, and they said, "How many drinks will it take to get your mother over there?" He says. Now, I like people that are direct with me. He nearly got a slap that day, but I always appreciate honesty. So you've moved me today, Claire, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, and couldn't have been at a better time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you. Nick, have you anything to say? Unmute yourself.
I have, Mossy. I have. Claire, it was a beautiful, beautiful chair, and I identified with a lot. So my sobriety date is the 24th of December 75, and I used that date because I went out to drink, and I ended up in a meeting. I didn't take a drink. I ended up in the meeting. And you shared 2 or 3 things, that I identified so much with, and I want to thank you for that. Okay, Mossy.
Thanks, Nick. And over to Serillio. Good evening to you, sir. It's fantastic to have you here.
Thank you so very much for having me. My name is Serillio. I am an alcoholic. Today, I'm just grateful to be available to be able to share with you. Thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous, and thank Alcoholics Anonymous for bringing me back to the God of my understanding. Thank you, Claire, for sharing your experience, strength, and hope. I thought of alcohol as being a party favor, something to bring joy and happiness to people, because that's how I remember and recognize alcohol. My parents used to have parties every weekend, just about. My mother was a party animal. She used to drink, and her friends used to drink, and they used to dance and sing. And I thought that was such a joyous and happy affair. Everybody seemed to be happy. It's not until I became a teenager that I started to realize that the people were drinking, and at certain times of their drinking, they became violent towards one another for simple things, a bump, a word said in haste, a look, and people start reacting to it negatively. I came in Alcoholics Anonymous being an honest being an honest drunk. I was not an alcoholic. I didn't know about alcoholism until I got involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe I was a drunk from birth. My mother used to tell me as a little child, they used to put alcohol on my gums for me for teething. Every year, they used to give us a drink of wine on Thanksgiving and on New Year's. And so I grew up drinking. During the parties, when people started to leave, the drinks would be on the table, and as a little toddler, I used to go by and just swig the drinks. And then I start dancing. And everybody used to watch me dance, twirling around like a little happy top. Little did I know that that was going to lead me down the road to become a full-fledged alcoholic. Like I said, I was a drunk. I used to drink all the time. When I woke up, when I went to sleep, when I thought about a drink, when I didn't think about a drink. I just drank to be drinking because I thought it was a thing to do. And it was commonplace in our community. My drinking became problematic as I grew older. I started noticing that I started doing things a little bit different than I used to. I started disrespecting my parents. I started disrespecting people in the streets and at school and at work. And I started to be somebody that I didn't recognize after a while. I started missing days at school. I started missing days at work. And then I took a hostage young lady that I met at a party, and I married this young lady. Well, we became entrenched in each other, and we had a child. And because of my drinking, I abandoned that child and that lady. I abandoned jobs. I left apartments. I got rid of cars. I gave away everything that I had because I wanted to drink and drug. That just led me to become homeless. I live in New York. I'm a native New Yorker. I came from Brooklyn, New York. It was a gang-infested neighborhood that I grew up in, and I was the only son. So I was the protector of my family. My mother was the party animal, as I mentioned. She used to go to a bar around the corner from my house. And my father used to send me around there to get her to bring home to have dinner. Sometimes she would come willingness. Sometimes she would smack me and curse me out for getting her away from having free drinks. That's how I grew up. I grew up with alcohol. I grew up with violence. And I was a violent child to start with. In elementary school, I nearly strangled somebody to death on the playground because I blacked out. I didn't know what was going on. But that was to haunt me for the rest of my days, because I realized then that I had something that I found out called rage. I didn't get angry. I got rageful. And when I got rageful, anything could happen to anybody that was around me. I started to hang around with people that did the same thing I did, drink and drug and party. And that turned out to be kind of devastating because I felt alone, even in a crowd of people. But one thing that was always there with me, and I look back at it in retrospect now, God was always there with me. He looked out for me in the times of danger, in a time of doubt, in a time of frustration and confusion. There's times I walked down the streets of New York not knowing what I was doing, and he protected me and got me home safely. When I finally wound up in Alcoholics Anonymous, it was through a homeless shelter. I heard the message of hope in a little dingy basement in an armory for homeless people. That message of hope came through like the bright shining sunshine. And it just illuminated something in my soul that tells me I don't have to live this way any longer. So I started to make meetings from that time on, and that was 1988. But I didn't get clean and sober until January 12th, 1990. I had to experiment to find out what I was doing and if I was doing what I really wanted to do. But I started making meetings, and I started to listen to the people in these meetings. And there was a group of men at this one meeting that I used to attend, the Lyndon St. Albans group of Queens, New York. There was a table of 6 gentlemen, and they seemed to be the elder statesmen of this group. And I used to stand behind them to listen to their words of wisdom and try to obtain some of what they were sharing. And so when they told me that I need to get a sponsor, I asked all of these 6 gentlemen, and all of them said no. So I didn't think I had any hope in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I saw someone in Alcoholics Anonymous that I had known years before, a young lady. And so I went to one of the elder ladies in the room, and I was going to ask this lady how I can date this young lady that I've seen in the rooms. Well, this lady, Miss Shirley W., she won't complain about me using her name. I asked her how I was going to date this lady, and she told me, I will be your sponsor. That lady became my sponsor. And she got me involved in service. She got me involved in doing step work. She got me involved in recovery, and I'm eternally grateful for her. For the first 26 years of my recovery, this lady had me take commitments to speak, chair a step and transition meeting, go out and do service in the community and in Alcoholics Anonymous. My very first step was one that she told me I would be on for a year because I had a hard head, and it was something that I needed to learn, that I was powerless over alcohol and that my life was unmanageable. But she also had me read acceptance. I was not only powerless over alcohol, I was powerless over people, places, things, and situations. And I didn't understand how that was going to relate to my alcoholism until I had a situation on my job. One of my coworkers had done something that caused me very much internal conflict. And we worked in a rehab, and he took stuff that belonged to the clients in the rehab. And one morning, he said something that just broke the camel's back, and I let him have it both barrels. I belittled this man in front of all our coworkers and our bosses. And when I belittled him and saw him shrivel up, I felt very proud. I felt superior. I finally knocked this guy down a peg. And I called my sponsor. My sponsor said, step 1, that's all. And I realized that step 1, I was powerless. I was powerless over this man, and I was powerless over seeing anything contrary to his own beliefs. The next morning, I went into the office in front of everybody, and I apologized to him for my behavior, my speech, and for saying the things that I did. That was my first and most important lesson in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had lived the first step. I had a visual of what that first step meant for me. And my sponsor kept talking about, you're going to live these steps. You're going to incorporate them in your life. Otherwise, you're just taking steps and you're reading. You're not doing anything to change your life. Step 2, I had a problem with because I didn't have any kind of connection with a higher power. I didn't believe in God because I felt that I was the worst thing that could happen to humanity. But my sponsor told me, he says, Serillio, you're just a sick person and you don't know how to get well yet, but keep on coming, things will change. And slowly but surely, the group had demonstrated to me that they can change. The people in the group showed me that I could stay away from a drink 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day at a time. That group was more stronger than me in concerning alcohol, so I made that group my higher power. And I kept that going for the first 2 years of my sobriety. At one point, I had to realize that I had to have a personal God. And I finally made the decision to call God by name. But I didn't call him God at first. I called him Bubba. Hey, Bubba, this is your friend Serillio, the alcoholic, the sinner, and I got a problem I need to talk to you about. And that's how I started my relationship, my personal relationship with my higher power. After that, I got to step 3. I made a decision to call God by name. And when I did that, it seemed like the doors just started opening up on all the good things that I had been missing all my life. All the things were covered over by alcohol and drugs, finally became visible to me. And I started to realize these things are available to me. In step 4, I had to learn that I had to get rid of some of the garbage that I had been carrying around, some of the guilt and shame and remorse that I'd lived with all these years. And my sponsor guided me through these steps. My sponsor didn't take me through the big book. My sponsor was the big book. She demonstrated to me all the things that the big book demonstrated and said. So as I got through step 4 and I started to do step 5 with my sponsor, I wrote an autobiography, and my sponsor said, no, that's not what it calls for in the big book. You go by the columns and you do exactly what it says. And I started to do that. But I had a problem. I had a problem with institutions. I was in the Marine Corps and I thought I got a bad deal. So I could not understand why I had to put down institutions. And my sponsor made it very clear. It's not the institution that you have a problem with, it's the individuals in the institution. So I had to make names. First Sergeant White, Gunnery Sergeant Smith. These are the people I had to put on my inventory list. And as I did that and did the 5th step with my sponsor, I started to realize I'm coming to understand what it means to be free of guilt, remorse, and shame. I'm also becoming free of carrying extra burdens that I don't need to carry anymore. So as I did the 5th step, and my sponsor said, okay, now you said these things to me and to God, what do you do next? The next step is step 6. I was entirely ready to have all those things removed from me right then and right there, because I realized by getting rid of them, I'm freeing myself to become a better person, to live a more free life. And then she said, the next step is 7. And what does that mean to you? I humbly asked God to remove my shortcomings. And I wanted them removed right then and there. My sponsor made it very clear to me, they can be removed right now, but they can come back tomorrow. And you have to do the same thing tomorrow. Ask God to remove these character defects from you. In step 8, she said, you had to make a list of all the people you had harmed. Well, I made a list in step 4. But when I got to step 8, there was more people I had to add to that list. And I added the names to it, and I told my sponsor about it, and we went over it. And then she said, now the 9th step is where you make direct amends to wherever possible. And that's what I did. I started to make direct amends. My mother and father had died before I came into sobriety. So I had to go into their cemetery and say a prayer, write a letter, say a prayer, and burn it at the gravesite. I sat at their gravesite and I cried for about an hour or so. But when I left that cemetery, I felt as though I had been relieved of a whole heavy burden of guilt of what I didn't do for my parents and what I did do to them. And then step 10 told me I had to continue to do this personal inventory. And I practice this on a daily basis. Step 11, I sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God as I understand Him. I try to do this on a daily basis. My sponsors gave me a task early on to do a morning meditation. My first year in sobriety, she gave me the daily reflection book, and that's what I did every morning, the daily reflection, 24-hour day book. But then I've been adding more and more books over the years. I do 10 books in the morning, plus a Bible reading before I get out of bed. I also do a reading in the evening. These are the things that I've been practicing since I came in. And I'm grateful because it helps me to start my day and to end my day. Being grateful to God for giving me the benefit of the breath of life for the morning, the strength to carry on and carry the message of recovery to those still sick and suffering, and to be the best person I can be, to help not only people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, but people outside the rooms. And step 12 tells me I had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, practicing these principles in all my affairs, and trying to carry the message of alcoholics to alcoholics who still suffer. I had to learn how to live this program, and I continue to do that. Today, I realize I only have today. I only have this moment. I don't have an hour from now. I don't have a minute from now. God has given me all that I have and all that I can contain, and I'm grateful for that. I went to a meeting at a little church called the Thursday Luncheon Meeting, and on the board, they had this saying, "Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be." And when I say that, I had to remember something. I can only be in the moment. I can only be here at this moment to receive the blessings and grace that God gives me through the people that I meet and hear in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I can only share what I have in this moment, those that are around me, those who are shared before me, and those who will share after me. Because what you give me are God's graces and God's blessings that may help me get through this day, that can help me in my time of need. So these little words and these things that I learned here are ways of living that I've learned to accept. And I'm eternally grateful for each and every one of you all and every meeting that I've gone to and every meeting that I continue to make, because you'll help me become the best person that I can be. So if no one told you today that they love you, I do. Thank you for letting me share.
Serillio, thank you so much. That was just amazing. You know, the thing that's going through my head right now is, you know, the A team, and they say I love when a plan comes together. I screwed up again. I ended up with 2 speakers, but look at what happened. The message of hope and love has come through the screen again today, and I identify so much with you, Serillio. I had this rage as a child, and I carried that through into my adulthood, and I picked up a drink and it got even worse. And like you, when my head went, I'd come to and I'd see the damage I'd done. And it wasn't nice. And there's no part of my drinking career that I ever want back. So like everybody else here, I get regular meetings, I stay in contact with a higher power, but I don't understand what it is. But I'm only 5'2". I believe there's something bigger than me out there, and I do ask for help and I give thanks. And my instruction manual is the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it works. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys, and thanks so much for keeping me sober today. Nick?
Right. Thank you, Serillio. You know, I identified with some of your chair, and you know, my first sponsor was a wonderful lady, and she every time I used to go with her, and that she'd read the St. Francis prayer to me, you know, and I hold that dear today, you know, because you know, it's everything I wasn't. You know, when I was a child, I was a liar, thief, and cheat. You know, I came into this fellowship and I learned what honesty was. I learned what love was in this fellowship. And I always say that I think I married my wife for lust. And through this program, and both of us work in a program, that I learned to love her. And she became my soulmate, you know. And so, you know, and when she died, you know, I look back and she was a gift to me from God, you know, a gift in my life. And I think I'm a very, very lucky person today, you know, knowing people in Alcoholics Anonymous, being part of, and I used to come to meetings, now I am part of the AA, you know, and I love it. I absolutely love being sober. We have come to the end of the meeting. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door upon it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can help others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us that we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
Thank you, Mick, and thanks, Kathy, for the reading. Again, thanks a million, Claire and Serillio, for the sharing. Absolute cracker of a meeting.
Yes.
Thanks, Kathleen, for timekeeping. And that's it.
See, Mossy, you walk in dogs, Mark, and you come out smelling of roses.
Absolutely.
Right. Reminder, we have a meeting on 7 days a week at 8:30 a.m. UK time. We also have a lunchtime meeting every Sunday at 1 p.m. UK time. This is a meditation meeting.
And on Saturdays at 6 p.m. we have our old timers meeting, an extended share recorder for our archives. And on Thursdays we have a meeting at 7:30 p.m. UK time. We use the same meeting code for all our meetings.
Stick around for a fellowship after the meeting. If you want to breakout room after the meeting, please ask the host.
And the yellow card. Who you see here?
What you hear here,
when you leave here,
let it stay here.
And that's it, guys. That's a wrap. We'll finish up by getting Claire and Serillio to see, can you do the preamble together as we wrap up?
God,
God grant
grant
us the serenity to accept things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can,
and the wisdom to know the difference.
Thanks so much, guys.